The firelight dances across the great hall of the Beornings, casting long shadows over the gathered faces of warriors and families alike. Tonight is no ordinary night. Tonight, beneath the ancient beams of this hall, a new chieftain rises. Bregolas, the sixth chieftain of his people, stands tall, his voice steady as he speaks of protection, of unity, of the unseen dangers lurking beyond the Misty Mountains. But if you listen closely, beneath the weight of his words, there's something else, a quiet tremor in his breath. The unspoken fear of a leader who knows the road ahead is darker than any of them realize. Welcome, friend, wherever you are in the world tonight, whether the moon is high or the first light of dawn is just brushing the horizon. We're glad you've joined us here in this moment as the tale of Bragolas begins. Let us know in the comments below, where are you listening from and what hour has settled over your land. There's something special about knowing we're all sharing this story together, even across distances and time. The Beornings are a people of strength and resilience, carved from the wild lands they call home. For generations, they've stood as guardians against the creeping shadows of the world, their halls built to withstand storms both natural and unseen. And now, Bragolas takes up that mantle, his hands still unmarked by the trials that await him. There's a tension in the air tonight, a whisper of change. Can you feel it? The way the firelight seems to flicker just a little brighter when he speaks, as if the very flames are listening. Leadership is never given lightly among the Beornings, and Bragolas knows this better than most. His pledge is not just words, it's a promise etched into the bones of the mountains themselves. But promises, like all things in Middle-earth, are tested. And his test will come sooner than anyone could guess. So settle in, dear listener. Let the crackle of the hearth and the weight of Bragolas' voice wrap around you like a cloak. This is more than just a story. It's a journey into the heart of what it means to lead when the shadows grow long, to stand firm when the world itself seems to shift beneath your feet. By the time this tale unfolds, you'll walk away feeling as though you stood beside him in that hall, your breath held as he speaks, your heart echoing the same quiet question: what does it truly take to be worthy of such a title? The answers lie ahead, in the whispers of the wind and the secrets of the Misty Mountains. All you have to do is listen. The hall falls silent as the heavy oak door creaks open, admitting a scout whose cloak is still damp with the night's dew. His breath comes fast, his eyes wide with urgency. The whispers in the woods, he says, are no longer just stories. They've taken shape. Shadows move where no light should falter, and the air near the old ford tastes of rust and decay. The scout's words hang in the silence, thick as smoke, and every face turns to Bragolas. Here, in this moment, the weight of his new title presses down upon him. A lesser leader might act rashly, sending warriors into the dark without a second thought. Another might cower behind their walls, hoping the threat will pass like a storm. But Bragolas is neither. He leans forward, the firelight carving deep lines into his face as he weighs the choices, to investigate risks, walking blind into whatever lurks beyond the trees. To hold back risks, letting the darkness grow unchecked. And then, with a slow nod, he makes his decision. A handful of his swiftest trackers will go, but not as warriors, as watchers. They'll move like mist, gathering answers without drawing blades unless forced. Meanwhile, the rest will strengthen the palisades, ready for whatever may come. It's a balance, this choice, bold enough to face the unknown, but cautious enough to protect what's theirs. The hall erupts into motion, but Bragolas remains still, his gaze fixed on the flames. This is the first test, and though none dare say it aloud, they all feel it, the unspoken truth that leadership is not just about strength, but about knowing when to hold it back. The old ford waits, and the shadows there do not sleep. Whatever comes next, one thing is certain, the days of quiet are over. The elders sit in a circle of weathered oak chairs, their faces lined with years of hard-won wisdom. The firelight catches in their eyes as they speak, each word heavy with the weight of centuries. The old prophecies speak of this, murmurs Gorloth, the eldest, his fingers tracing the runes carved into his staff. When the sixth chieftain rises, so too shall the shadow from the deep places. A trial by fire awaits not of flesh, but of spirit. The air grows thick with the scent of burning herbs, the kind used in solemn rituals long before Bragolas drew breath. He listens, his hands resting on the hilt of his sword, but there's a restlessness in his stance. The warnings are clear, yet something in him bristles at the idea of waiting, of letting fear dictate his steps. And if the shadow comes, he asks, his voice steady, do the prophecies say we should meet it with bowed heads? A silence follows, broken only by the crackle of the hearth. The elders exchange glances, some uneasy, some grudgingly impressed. They know this fire in him, this refusal to cower, is why he wears the chieftain's mantle. But they also know the cost of recklessness. Gorloth leans forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The flame that burns too bright consumes itself, Bragolas. Even the mightiest tree bends before the storm, lest it break. For a moment, the young chieftain hesitates, his gaze flickering to the carved figures on the walls, heroes of old, some triumphant, some fallen. Then his jaw sets. Then let the storm come, he says, rising to his feet. But I will not let it reach our halls unchallenged. As he strides from the chamber, the elders do not try to stop him. They've done their duty, spoken their piece. Now they can only watch as the threads of fate tighten around him. Outside, the first light of dawn stains the horizon, painting the mist in shades of gold and crimson. Bragolas breathes deep, the cool air sharp in his lungs. By midday, he'll ride for the old ford with his trackers, his resolve unshaken. But behind him, in the dim hall, Gorloth closes his eyes and murmurs a prayer to the forgotten gods. For he's seen this before, the arrogance of youth, the hunger to prove oneself, and he knows too well how such stories often end. The wind howls through the trees as Bragolas leads his companions along the ancient path, their cloaks snapping like banners against the gathering storm. The sky above is a roiling sea of gray, the kind of clouds that promise more than rain. They carry the weight of something unseen, something watching. The horses toss their heads nervously, their breath steaming in the damp air, and even the birds have gone silent. Then, a sharp cry cuts through the wind, not human, not beast, but something in between. There, curled in the roots of an old oak, lies a fox, its russet fur matted with mud and blood. One of the trackers makes a sign against ill fortune, whispering that a wounded creature on such a journey is a dark portent. But Bragolas doesn't hesitate. He kneels in the wet earth, his hands steady as he examines the animal's leg. A sign is only as dark as the heart that reads it, he murmurs, pulling a strip of cloth from his pack to bind the wound. His companions exchange glances, some uneasy, some softening with reluctant admiration. The fox watches him with wary eyes, its flanks heaving, but it doesn't struggle. There's a moment, fleeting but profound, where the storm seems to hold its breath. Then, with a flick of its tail, the creature limps into the underbrush, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Bregolas rises, wiping his hands on his cloak. "We move on," is all he says, but the act lingers in the air between them. Compassion is not weakness among the Beornings. It is the quiet steel that binds a people together. And though none speak of it now, this moment will echo in the days to come, when allies are needed and trust must be given freely. The storm breaks overhead, the first heavy drops, striking the leaves like distant drums, but Bragolas doesn't look back. The path ahead is dark, but his steps never waver. The branches overhead twist together like grasping fingers, their leaves hissing in a language just beyond understanding. Bragolas halts at the forest's edge, one hand raised to still his companions. The air here is different, thicker, as if the very light struggles to pierce through. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. Thalion steps close, his voice low and urgent. "This place speaks with a tongue older than our people. We should turn back, regroup." His fingers twitch toward his axe, eyes darting between the shifting shadows, but Bragolas doesn't flinch. He knows the stories, how these woods swallowed hunters whole, how travelers who strayed from the path were found days later, wandering and hollow-eyed, babbling of voices in the bark. Yet he also knows the weight of the oath he swore beneath the great hall's beams. "If we retreat now," he murmurs, "the shadow will only grow bolder." His breath fogs in the unnatural chill as he takes the first step forward. The moss beneath his boots gives way like skin, soft and too warm for the cold air. With each stride deeper, the whispers coil around them, words just shy of comprehension. Was that a child's laugh, a woman's sob? The trees themselves seem to lean closer, their trunks etched with markings too precise to be natural. Thalion's breath comes faster now, his knuckles white around his weapon. "Chieftain," he begins, but Bragolas shakes his head. There, ahead, a glimmer of movement, a figure. No, just the flicker of mist between the trunks, or so it seems. Then the ground shifts, not the tremble of an earthquake, but something subtler, like the forest itself drawing in a breath. Bragolas freezes, his pulse loud in his ears. The cold isn't just in the air anymore, it's in his bones, in the roots beneath his feet. Something is here. Not behind or beside them, but beneath, waiting. Thalion's grip tightens on his shoulder, but Bragolas doesn't turn. He can't, because now at last the whispers form a word. His name, spoken not by the wind, not by the trees, but by something that knows him. The choice hangs in the air like a blade. To step back is to admit fear. To step forward is to walk into the mouth of the unknown. And so Bragolas does what chieftains do. He chooses. His foot falls, the moss sighing beneath his weight, and the forest exhales with him. The path ahead is darker now, the whispers louder, but the duty of a leader is not to avoid the dark. It's to carry the light into it. The torchlight wavers as Bragolas sweeps it across the tangled undergrowth, its glow painting the tree trunks in flickering amber. For a heartbeat, all is still, then movement. Not the sway of branches, not the scuttle of some woodland creature, but something deliberate. Shadows detach themselves from the gloom, low and sinuous, circling just beyond the fire's reach. A growl ripples through the air, deeper than any wolf's, vibrating in the chests of the warriors before it even reaches their ears. Then the eyes appear. Not the reflective gleam of ordinary beasts, but pulsing embers suspended in the dark, hateful and hungry. Wargs. Thalion's axe is already in his hands, the metal singing as it clears its sheath. Scouts, he hisses, and the word hangs between them like a curse. Scouts meant a larger force. Scouts meant something worse was coming. The first beast lunges without warning, a black streak of matted fur and bared fangs. Bragolas sidesteps, his torch swinging in a wide arc. The flame kisses the warg's muzzle, and the creature recoils with a yelp. But another is already upon them, snapping at Thalion's legs. Steel meets flesh, and the night erupts into snarls and shouts. The Beornings fight like the wild things they are descended from, their blows precise, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance. It's over as quickly as it began. The wargs melt back into the forest, their whimpers fading into the trees, but the victory feels hollow. Bragolas kneels, fingers brushing the trampled earth where the creatures stood. The ground is sticky with more than mud. A thick, dark substance clings to his fingertips, reeking of spoiled meat and something sharper, like metal left too long in the rain. Not blood, not quite. Thalion wipes his blade clean, his breath coming hard. They weren't hunting prey, he mutters. They were hurting us. The realization settles over them like a shroud. These wargs weren't driven by hunger or instinct. They moved with purpose, with malice, and if they were scouts, then whatever sent them was close. Too close. Bregolas rises, his jaw tight. The torchlight catches the scars on his arms, old wounds from battles past, and for the first time since leaving the hall, something cold coils in his gut. This was no chance encounter. The forest had been waiting for them, and deeper in the darkness, something older, something patient, was watching. The storm drives them forward, rain lashing at their faces like icy needles, until the trees part to reveal the jagged silhouette of crumbling towers. The Elven outpost rises from the earth like the bones of some great beast, its once gleaming stones now veined with moss and time. Thalion hesitates at the threshold, his hand hovering near his axe. Nothing good waits in places the elves abandoned. He mutters, his breath fogging in the damp air, but the wind shrieks through the ruins, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else, something faintly sweet, like herbs left too long in the sun. Sanctuary. Bragolas steps inside, his boots scattering shards of pottery, etched with symbols none of them can read. The roof is long gone, but the walls still stand, their surfaces carved with scenes of battles fought beneath strange stars. And there, beneath a fallen beam, something flutters, a scrap of parchment, its edges browned with age. He kneels, brushing away centuries of dust to reveal a map. Not of roads or rivers, but of meeting places, rendezvous points where men and elves once stood shoulder to shoulder, their alliance inked in delicate, flowing script. Thalion leans over his shoulder, his skepticism giving way to wonder. The old tales spoke of this, he whispers, but I never thought. His voice trails off as Bragolas traces a finger along a faded line. A path leading deep into the mountains, to a peak marked with a single elven rune. strength, or perhaps sacrifice. The wind moans through the broken arches, and for a moment, the rain seems to hush. Bragolas folds the map carefully, tucking it into his tunic. The parchment is brittle, but the weight of it feels solid against his ribs, like a promise half remembered. Outside, the storm rages on, but here, in the heart of the ruins, there's a quiet certainty. The past is not truly gone. It lingers in these stones, in these ink-stained lines, waiting to be rediscovered. And if men and elves once stood together against the dark, perhaps they could again. Thalion watches him, his expression unreadable. "You mean to follow it?" he says, not a question. Bragolas doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. The map burns against his skin, its secrets whispering of roads untraveled, of allies unseen. The wind shifts, carrying with it the distant howl of wargs. They're closer now, much closer. But for the first time since leaving the hall, Bragolas feels it, not hope, not yet, but the first faint stirrings of something like it. A path forward, a chance. The ruins creak around them, as if the very stones are holding their breath. The decision is made. They will not flee. They will not hide. They will walk the old road and let the shadows behind them growl all they like. The dream clings to him like spider silk, sticky and impossible to shake. Bragolas sits bolt upright in the pre-dawn gloom, his tunic damp with sweat, fingers curled so tightly around the Elven map that the parchment crackles in protest. The vision lingers, a figure wreathed in smoke, its voice the scrape of stone on stone, offering a blade in one hand and a hollowed-out horn in the other. Power or sacrifice, no explanation, no mercy in the choosing. Thalion stirs beside him, the fire reduced to embers between them. His eyes gleam in the faint light, sharp with questions he doesn't voice. Some things don't need words between warriors who have fought back to back since they were boys. Instead, he tosses Bragolas a waterskin and busies himself with checking the edge of his axe, the rasp of whetstone on steel filling the silence. It's a kindness, this pretense of normalcy. Bragolas drinks deeply, the water doing nothing to wash away the taste of the dream. He uncurls his fingers from the map, half expecting to find it change the ink, bleeding into new shapes, the path twisting towards some terrible destination. But no, the lines remain as they were, the Elven script delicate as ever. Yet now, he can't shake the feeling that it's more than directions. It's a test. Thalion finally speaks, his voice low. Bad dreams have a way of sticking when you're this close to the mountains. He doesn't ask for details. He doesn't have to. The way Bragolas' shoulders tense tells him enough. Somewhere beyond the ruins, a branch snaps. Both men freeze, hands drifting to their weapons, but no growl follows, no telltale scrape of claws. Just the wind, sighing through the broken towers like it's mourning something lost. Thalion exhales through his nose. We should move before full light. Whatever's out there, it's not done with us. Bragolas nods, rolling the map carefully. The dream isn't just a warning. It's a fork in the road, one he'll have to face sooner or later. And when he does, he won't be choosing for himself. He'll be choosing for every soul under his protection. The weight of that truth settles over him as he straps on his sword. Dawn is coming, cold and gray, but the real darkness still waits ahead, patient, hungry, and grinning like the edge of a blade. The mist curls around the ranger's boots like living tendrils as he steps into the clearing, his cloak frayed at the edges, his face half hidden beneath a hood stained with travel and time. Dawn hasn't yet touched the peaks above them, but his eyes gleam in the half-light, sharp, weary, and utterly certain. The Dunedain don't appear to mortals without cause, and this one's presence alone is a warning written in the air between them. Thalion's hand drifts toward his axe, but Bragolas raises a palm, stilling him. There's a gravity to the way the ranger stands, the way his breath fogs in the cold, like the slow exhalation of some ancient beast. They are gathering in the high pass, the ranger says, his voice a rasp of leather on stone. Orcs, yes, but worse things too, things that haven't walked these slopes since the days of your grandfather's grandfather. He doesn't blink as he speaks, as if daring Bragolas to doubt him. The words hang, heavy with implication. Orcs are one thing, predictable in their savagery. But the ranger speaks of something older, something that remembers the taste of elven steel and the weight of forgotten curses. Bragolas studies the man's face, searching for the lie, the trap. The Dunedain are allies in tales, but tales don't feed families or keep watch through the long nights. Why come to me? He asks, the question blunt as a hammer stroke. The ranger's lips thin, because they're not just digging trenches or sharpening blades. They're searching for something buried. His gaze flicks to the map, peeking from Bragolas' tunic, then back to his eyes. You've felt it already, haven't you? The pull of it, the dreams. A chill that has nothing to do with the morning air slithers down Bragolas' spine. He hasn't spoken of the dream to anyone, not even Thalion. Yet this stranger knows, and watches him now with something like pity. Thalion shifts, his voice a low growl. And why should we trust you? Men of your kind have been scarce when the wargs came calling. The ranger doesn't flinch. Trust is a luxury none of us can afford, he says simply. But if you wait for certainty, you'll find it in the form of orcish steel at your throat. He reaches into his cloak, and every warrior tenses. But what he withdraws isn't a weapon. It's a broken arrow, its shaft blackened as if by fire, its fletching stained with something dark and sticky. This was found near the pass, not orc work. Something fouler. Bragolas takes the arrow, turning it over in his hands. The wood is cold, unnaturally so, and the tip bears a sigil he doesn't recognize, a spiral, like a serpent eating its own tail. The ranger leans closer, his next words barely audible. They seek the horn of Thore, and if they find it before you do, the shadows will swallow these mountains whole. Silence. Even the wind stills, as if the world itself is waiting for Bragolas' answer. The horn of Thore, a relic from the days when dwarves delved too deep and woke what should have slept. A thing of power, yes, but also of doom. The dream flashes behind his eyes again. The blade, the hollow horn, the voice that wasn't a voice. Choices. Thalion is watching him, his face unreadable. The ranger hasn't moved, his patience infinite as the stars. And Bragolas, he stands at the edge of a cliff. Only he can see, the weight of his people's futures balanced on his next breath. To trust a stranger is to risk betrayal. To ignore him is to risk blindness. And the mountains, old and cruel and knowing, watch it all unfold without judgment. The first true light of dawn breaks over the peaks, painting the snow in blood-red hues. Bragolas pockets the arrow and meets the ranger's gaze. Show me the way. Two men, one who's walked the wilds alone for decades, one who's carried the hopes of his people for mere days, lock eyes. No smiles, no clasped hands. Just the understanding that some roads once taken cannot be untraveled. The ranger nods once, then turns toward the pass. Behind them, the camp stirs, the clank of gear and the murmur of voices, a stark contrast to the silence ahead. Thalion falls into step beside Bragolas, his voice barely above a whisper. You're sure of this? Bragolas doesn't answer immediately. The horn of Thore looms in his mind, a shadow he can't outrun. But shadows, he's learning, are best faced with eyes wide open. No, he admits at last, but I'm sure of what happens if we do nothing. And with that, they step into the mist after the ranger, the path ahead shrouded, the stakes higher than any of them dare say aloud. The ranger stops where the path fractures like a broken bone, one fork clawing upward into the jagged teeth of the mountains, the other winding back toward the dim safety of distant hearths. He doesn't speak, doesn't gesture, just stands there, his silence louder than any argument. The wind carries the scent of pine and something darker, something that prickles the back of Bragolas' neck. Home is a week's hard march away. The horn of Thore could be a day's climb, or a trap. Thalion shifts beside him, his breath fogging in the cold. We could send word to the hall, he murmurs. Gather more blades before what? Bragolas interrupts, his voice quiet but edged. Before the enemy digs up a weapon that could unmake us, or before we admit we're afraid. The words hang between them, raw as an open wound. He doesn't look at his men, but he feels their eyes on him. Some questioning, some resigned. They'll follow wherever he leads, even to their graves. That knowledge settles like a stone in his gut. The ranger watches impassive. Men have died for less than what lies up there, he says at last, and more will die if it's left to the dark. There's no judgment in his tone, only the grim certainty of a man who's seen too many crossroads and too few good choices. Bragolas closes his eyes. For a heartbeat, he lets himself imagine turning back. The weight of his cloak as he pushes open the hall's great doors, the relief on the elders' faces, the way the firelight would soften the fear in his wife's eyes. But then he sees the other future, the wargs howling at the palisade, the shadows spilling over the land like ink, and the unspoken question in every gaze. You knew, and you did nothing. When he opens his eyes, the decision is already made, not with a shout or a grand speech, but with a slow exhale that fades into the mountain air. We go up, he says, and the words aren't brave, they're just true. Thalion nods once, sharp as a blade being sheathed. The ranger turns without a word and starts climbing. And Bragolas, he takes the first step, then the next, his boots crushing frost-rimed lichen to pulp. Leadership isn't about certainty. It's about stepping forward when every instinct screams to retreat. Behind him, the men fall into line, their breath steady, their grips tight on their weapons. No cheers, no protests, just the quiet rustle of wool and leather, and the understanding that some choices can't be unmade. The path narrows, the rocks rising like the ribs of some long-dead beast. The higher they climb, the thinner the air becomes, until even the wind sounds like whispering. And then, a sound that doesn't belong, distant, echoing up from the depths, metal on stone, a rhythm, digging. Bregolas freezes, one hand raised. The ranger's gaze meets his, and in that look, there's no triumph, no "I told you so." Only the grim acknowledgement that the real work begins now. The men tense, their knuckles whitening around their axe hafts. Somewhere ahead, the enemy moves in the dark. Somewhere ahead, the horn waits, and Bragolas, with the weight of 100 lives at his back, does the only thing left to do. He moves toward it. The rock slide starts with a whisper, a trickle of pebbles, then a groan deep in the mountain's bones. Bragolas' hand hovers over the sword's hilt, its pommel carved with the same spirals as the poisoned arrow. The runes on the cave walls pulse faintly, their glow thickening as the tremors build. Thalion braces against the shuddering stone, his shout lost beneath the roar of falling debris. It's not the mountain that resists. The ranger snarls, yanking Bragolas back as a boulder splits the ground where he stood. It's the blade. The sword lies embedded in an altar of blackened silver, its edge untouched by time, its crossguard wrought in the shape of interwoven serpents. Dwarven make, but not meant for dwarven hands, the runes tell that much. They speak of a pact, a price, a trial by blood and shadow. Bragolas wipes grit from his eyes, his pulse hammering in his throat. To take it up is to bind oneself to a legacy older than his people's halls. To leave it is to let the enemy claim it. The ranger's fingers dig into his shoulder. You feel it, don't you, the weight of the thing? Bragolas doesn't answer. The air around the sword thrums, not with malice, but with expectation, like a wolf sizing up a challenger. The mountain stills abruptly, the silence more unnerving than the quake. In that hush, the choice crystallizes. No grand speeches, no time for doubt. Just a man, a blade, and the unspoken question of what makes a chieftain worthy. Thalion coughs, spitting dust. If you're going to do it now. His axe is raised toward the cave mouth, where shadows shift against the light, shadows too solid, too deliberate. They've been followed. Bragolas exhales, then wraps his fingers around the hilt. The moment his skin meets metal, the world fractures. The cave walls dissolve into visions. A towering figure wreathed in storm, a city drowned in fire, a horn's mournful cry splitting the dawn. The sword's voice is no voice at all. It's a scream lodged in his ribs, a fire in his veins. It demands, it judges, it waits. Then, with a sound like a bell struck deep underground, the blade slides free. Light ripples along its edge, not the clean gleam of steel, but the blue-white flicker of lightning trapped in glass. The runes on the walls flare, then darken, their purpose fulfilled. Outside, the shadows howl, not in anger, in recognition. The sword thrums in Bragolas' grip, not a tool, not a weapon, a covenant, and the mountain, old and cunning, holds its breath to see what he'll do next. The earth roars like a waking beast, as the tunnel ceiling buckles behind them, sealing the passage with a thunderous crash of stone and dust. For a heartbeat, there's only darkness, thick, suffocating until the sword's glow pulses in Bragolas' grip, casting eerie blue light across the runes etched into the walls. They twist and coil like living things, their ancient language half remembered from nights spent hunched over Gorlot's fire, listening to the elders recite tales of the first wars. Blood is the key, the old man had rasped, but not the hand that spills it, the heart that offers. Thalion coughs, his voice raw with grit. If this is a test, I'd rather fight my way out. He kicks at the rubble, but the rocks don't budge. The ranger says nothing, his gaze locked on the runes, his lips moving silently as if deciphering a prayer. Bragolas steps forward, the sword humming against his palm. The runes aren't just markings, they're a question, one he's heard before, whispered in the margins of those old stories. What does a leader truly sacrifice? Power demands tribute, but not in steel or gold. The blade's light flickers as he raises it, not to strike, but to let its edge graze his forearm. A thin line of blood wells up, dripping onto the runes below. The reaction is instant. The carvings drink in the blood, their grooves flushing crimson, and the wall shudders, not collapsing, but unfolding, stone grinding against stone, to reveal a narrow passage. Not an escape, a path deeper. The ranger exhales sharply. Clever, it didn't want a warrior. It wanted someone who'd bleed for more than glory. The words hang in the air, heavier than the dust. Bragolas flexes his hand, the cut already sealing. The sword's glow brightens, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. It's chosen, and now it watches, to see if he'll balk at the next test. Thalion peers into the dark tunnel, his axe loose at his side. You'd think ancient death traps would come with clearer instructions. His joke falls flat, but it breaks the tension just enough. Bragolas meets his gaze, then the ranger's. No turning back now. The mountain has spoken, and it's far from done with them. The air in the tunnel smells of wet iron and something older, something that curls in the back of the throat like a warning. The sword's light licks at the walls, revealing more runes, more choices. Ahead, the darkness shifts, not empty, never empty, waiting. The first arrow whistles out of the dark like a curse, thudding into the ranger's shoulder before anyone can shout a warning. Then the night erupts. Orcs pour from crevices in the rock, their jagged blades catching the sword's eerie glow, their yellowed eyes alight with something sharper than hunger, recognition. They know what he carries. The Yurok at their center towers over the rest, its armor cobbled from dwarven mail and worse things. Its breath, a cloud of Chinese letter, as it bellows a command in black speech. Bragolas doesn't think. The sword moves as if it remembers this dance, its light flaring as it meets the first orc's crude scimitar. The metal shears like rotted wood, and the creature screams, not in pain, but in terror as the blade's glow licks up its arm, turning flesh to ash. The others hesitate, just for a heartbeat, long enough for Thalion to bury his axe in a snarling face, for the ranger to loose a dagger into a throat. But the Yurok only laughs, a sound like boulders grinding together. It doesn't attack. It watches, one clawed hand resting on the hilt of its own blade, a cruel, serrated thing, etched with runes that make the eyes ache. Pretty toy, it sneers, the common tongue clumsy in its mouth. But dawn comes, little chief, and with it, the real hunt. Its gaze flicks to the sword, then back to Bragolas, and the promise in those depths is colder than the mountain wind. Then, with a jerk of its head, it's gone, the orcs melting back into the shadows as swiftly as they came. The silence they leave behind is thicker than blood. Thalion swears, yanking his axe free from a corpse. They could have pressed. Why run? The ranger grits his teeth, snapping the arrow shaft in his shoulder. Because they weren't here to win, he mutters. They were here to see. His gaze lingers on Bragolas' sword, its light already dimming, as if sated. Or waiting. Bragolas wipes the blade clean on his cloak, the metal humming faintly under his fingers. The Yurok's words coil in his gut like a barbed hook. The real hunt, not a boast, a warning. Somewhere in the peaks above, something older than orcs, older than swords stirs, and now it knows his name. The wind shifts, carrying the metallic tang of snow and something else, a distant horn's note, too deep for elven craft, too resonant for mortal lungs to blow. The ranger goes very still. Thalion's knuckles whiten around his axe, and Bragolas, he tightens his grip on the sword, its pulse matching the sudden thunder of his heart. Battles are simple things. Wars are woven from choices, and his, it seems, are only beginning. The gates of the hall loom ahead, their timbers scarred by generations of wind and war, yet standing firm as the day they were raised. The sentries shout his name first, a cry that ripples through the courtyard like a struck bell. Then come the others, spilling from doorways and workshops, their faces alight with relief. Hands clap his shoulders, children weave between the warrior's legs, and for a moment, the weight of the sword at his hip feels lighter. But the Urok's laughter curls in his ears, sharp as a thorn. Dawn comes, the words cling like frost, unshaken by the warmth of home. Bragolas forces a smile, gripping forearms with his kin, yet his gaze keeps drifting to the elder's alcove, where Gorlath already watches, his roomy eyes unblinking. The council gathers in the hearth room, the fire built high despite the season. No feasting songs tonight, only the crackle of logs and the slow unrolling of the Elven map across the oak table. The elders trace the faded lines with fingers gnarled by time, their breath catching as one. "This is no mere chart," murmurs Vara, her voice like dry leaves. "It's a covenant, a promise carved in ink before our grandsires drew breath." Bragolas lays the sword beside it, its serpentine crossguard gleaming dully. The elders recoil, not in fear, but in grim recognition. Gorlath reaches out, stopping just shy of the blade. "The Pact of Thore," he whispers, forgotten but not broken. The name hangs heavy. Thore, the dwarf king, who delved too deep, whose hunger for glory woke things better left sleeping. A draft slithers through the room, making the flames dip and writhe. Vara's knuckles whiten around her staff. "The horn was never meant to sound again," she says, "but if the enemy seeks it, they mean to break the silence." Her eyes lock onto Bragolas, sharp as flint, and Pacts demand balance, a life for a life, a king's blood for a kingdom's safety. The words settle like a blade between his ribs. The sword hums faintly against the table, as if agreeing. Outside, the wind moans through the eaves, carrying with it the distant, discordant echo of a horn, or perhaps just the mountain's voice, taunting them all. Thalion shifts in the doorway, his axe still crusted with orc blood. "So what now?" he asks, too blunt for the elder's tastes, but it's the only question that matters. Bragolas studies the map, the sword, the faces of those who have guided his people for decades. The answer isn't in their warnings or their silence. It's in the weight of the steel at his side, and the unspoken truth that some choices aren't made in councils or caves. They are made in the dark, alone, with only your heartbeat for company. He straightens, rolling the map carefully. The firelight catches the scars on his hands, the new ones left by the sword's hilt. "Now," he says quietly, "we remind the mountain what it means to fear us." The elders exchange glances, None dare voice the thought that flickers behind their eyes, that fear has never been enough. Not against what's coming, but Bragolas is already moving toward the door, the sword's glow pulsing like a second heartbeat. Let them whisper, dawn has its hunters. And so does the dark. The first frost comes too early, brittle and white as bone, coating the eastern fields in a shroud that doesn't melt by midday. The villagers arrive at the hall in twos and threes, their cloaks patched with burlap, where the wool has worn thin, their hands clutching baskets of shriveled grain. The children are too quiet, their eyes darting toward the horizon, as if expecting the sky itself to split open. Bragolas listens to each account. The wells gone foul overnight, the livestock trembling at shadows, the way the wind carries a sound like distant drums when the sun dips below the mountains. None of it is proof. All of it is a warning. He sends riders at dawn, their horses' breath steaming in the unnatural chill, their saddlebags heavy with sealed scrolls and tokens of parley. The messages are simple. Come to the stone meadow at the next full moon. The enemy moves and division will doom us all. But when the replies trickle in, they are not the pledges of alliance he'd hoped for. The parchment from Dunharron is sealed with black wax, a refusal couched in careful words about seasonal misfortunes and unfounded fears. The chieftain of Redwater sends no words at all, just a bundle of arrows fletched with crow feathers. A threat or a challenge, depending on how you read the silence. Thalion slams a fist against the table, sending a cup of mulled wine sloshing onto the maps. Pride will strangle them before the orcs get the chance, he growls. They'd rather rot than follow a man half their age. Bragolas doesn't argue. He's seen the way the elders of those villages look at him, like he's a boy playing at war, his father's sword too heavy for his hands. Let them think it. The truth will come soon enough, etched in the lines of their own fear when the first farms burn. Yet there's another truth, one he keeps close as a dagger in his sleeve. Strength alone won't sway them. Not when their distrust runs deeper than any one enemy. So he does what no chieftain before him has dared. He leaves the hall unarmed, taking only a single torchbearer and the ranger, whose presence alone might lend weight to his words. The path to Dunharron is a winding thing, half overgrown, as if the land itself is trying to forget the way. The gates creak open, just wide enough for a wary face to peer out. No weapons, the guard grunts. Bragolas spreads his empty hands, but it's the ranger who steps forward, his hood thrown back to reveal the star clasp at his throat. The guard's breath catches. The Dunedain are myths to most folk, whispered about over winter fires. To see one in the flesh is like glimpsing a wolf prowling your own hearth, terrifying and impossible to ignore. Inside, the hall is thick with smoke and suspicion. Chieftain Orvin sits like a carved idol on his high seat, his beard streaked with gray, his knuckles swollen around a cup of sour ale. Speak then, he says, not offering a stool. Tell us why we should heed the fears of a boy and his pet ghost. The insult hangs in the air, deliberate as a drawn blade. Bragolas doesn't flinch. You've seen the signs, he says, his voice low. The blight on your crops isn't from poor weather. The crows circling your fields aren't waiting for scraps. He reaches into his tunic and pulls out the blackened arrow from the mountain, its spiral sigil glinting dully. This was forged in a place the sun hasn't touched in 1,000 years. And it's not alone. Orvin's jaw tightens, but his eyes flicker, just for a heartbeat. to the shuttered windows where the wind keens like a thing in pain. The ranger speaks then, his voice a rasp of gravel. You doubt his age, but not your own eyes. Look again. He tosses something onto the rushes. A handful of withered barley stalks, their roots black and stinking of decay. This isn't drought. It's a blight that walks, and it's coming west. Silence. Then, from the shadows near the fire, a woman's voice. My boy saw shapes in the mist last eve. Tall things with too many arms. A murmur ripples through the hall. Another voice. The miller's daughter swears the river spoke her name. Orvin's face darkens, but his grip on the cup slackens. Bragolas presses the advantage, not with a warrior's snarl, but with a chieftain's quiet certainty. I don't ask you to follow me. I ask you to stand beside me. For your children's sake, if not your own. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the first faint notes of a horn from the direction of red water. Not a war call. A warning. Orvin exhales through his nose, then jerks his chin at a servant. Bring the ale jug and a chair for the Beorning. It's not a yes, but it's not a no. And in times like these, that might be enough. The fire crackles, the shadows lengthen, and somewhere beyond the walls, the storm gathers its breath. The council fire burns low, its embers casting flickering shadows across the faces of the gathered chieftains. Bragolas stands before them, the sword laid bare across his palms, its serpentine hilt drinking in the firelight. The air is thick with pipe smoke and unspoken doubts, but when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of the mountain itself. The prophecies weren't meant to frighten us, he says, turning the blade so the runes along its spine catch the glow. They were meant to prepare us. Orvin of Dunharron leans forward, his chair groaning under his weight. Pretty words and prettier steel, he grumbles, though his eyes linger on the weapon's edge. But words don't stop warbands, boy, the others murmur, some in agreement, some in unease. Then the ranger steps from the shadows, his cloak parting to reveal the arrow clutched in his fist, its spiral sigil black as a bruise. This does, he says, tossing it onto the table. The wood sizzles where the arrowhead touches, a thin curl of acrid smoke rising into the silence. Before the gasps fade, the door crashes open. A scout stumbles in, his face streaked with soot, his tunic torn at the shoulder. The high pass, he pants, bracing himself against the table, swarming with orcs, thousands of them. And worse things, things with too many teeth. His voice cracks on the last word, and the room goes still. Even the fire seems to hold its breath. Redwater's chieftain, a woman with frost-pale hair and eyes like flint, is the first to move. She reaches across the table, her callous fingers brushing the arrow's shaft before recoiling. This is no ordinary raid, she mutters. They're not just coming to burn a few barns. They're coming to bury us. Bragolas doesn't smile, doesn't gloat. He simply lifts the sword, its tip grazing the smoke-heavy air. Then we dig our graves shallow, he says, and fill them with their dead instead. Something shifts in the room, a current, like the moment before a storm breaks. Orvin exhales through his nose, then slams his tankard down. Damn your eyes, boy, he growls. But when he rises, it's not to leave. It's to unbuckle his own axe and lay it beside the sword. One by one, the others follow Redwater's chieftain with her twin daggers, the marsh folk with their bone-tipped spears, even the graybeards from the northern holds with their notched blades. The ranger watches, his face unreadable. Outside, the wind howls through the eaves, carrying with it the distant, discordant clang of iron on stone. The orcs are coming. The horn is waiting, and Bragolas, with his borrowed sword and his untested alliance, stands at the center of it all, the weight of their collective hope heavy on his shoulders. Leadership isn't about commands. It's about moments like this, when the choice to follow becomes the only choice left. The fire crackles, spitting a spark onto the rushes. No one moves to stamp it out. Let it burn. They'll need the light soon enough. The night doesn't just darken, it bleeds. The moon hangs swollen and crimson over the battlefield, its light painting the snow in shades of rust and old wounds. Bragolas stands at the crest of the ridge, the sword in his grip, no longer just metal, but a living thing. Its glow so fierce, it sears his shadow into the ground behind him. Below, the horde surges like a black tide, their howls slicing through the wind. Orcs, yes, but among them stalk taller, gaunter shapes, their limbs too long, their movements too fluid. Things that shouldn't exist outside of fever dreams. He doesn't shout, doesn't need to. The clans at his back know what this moment demands. A single breath, shared between them all, then the thunder of boots and hooves as they charge, their voices rising in a wordless cry that shakes the frost from the trees. The sword's light carves a path ahead, turning steel to molten streaks in the dark, but Bragolas' eyes lock onto one figure, the Yurok commander, its jagged armor glinting like a wound in the night. It grins as he nears its own blade, a grotesque thing of serrated edges and weeping runes rising in challenge. The clash is more than steel. It's the mountain's rage given form, every strike sending sparks that don't fade but linger in the air like dying stars. The Yurok fights with the cunning of something ancient, its blows heavy enough to crack stone, but Bragolas moves like the wind off the peaks, swift, relentless, driven by something deeper than skill. The sword hums in his hands, its voice blending with the roar of his blood, and for a heartbeat, he's not just a man. He's the sum of every chieftain who came before, every oath sworn beneath these skies. Then the opening comes, a fraction of a second, where the Yurok overreaches, its snarl twisting into surprise as the blazing edge finds its throat. The creature doesn't scream. It laughs, wet and gurgling, even as it crumples, its final words a whisper that slithers into Bragolas' ears like poison. You win the battle, little king. But the war is just waking up, silence, or something like it. The muffled ringing of ears, the distant moans of the wounded, the hiss of blood melting snow. The clans stand victorious, but the field around them is a ruin. Trees lie splintered, their sap blackened. The earth itself is torn open in places, the soil beneath unnaturally pale, as if drained. And the sword, its light dims now, the runes along its blade, fading like embers in the dawn. Bragolas kneels, pressing his palm to the scorched ground. The land thrums under his touch, not with pain, but with warning. This was no ordinary attack. It was a test, a prelude. Somewhere, beneath the roots of the world, something old and hungry has turned its gaze their way. The clans cheer behind him, their voices raw with triumph, but their new chieftain doesn't join them. He stares east, where the first true light of morning stains the peaks. The Uruk's laughter still echoes in his bones. Victory tastes like ash, and dawn has never looked so much like a threat. The first light of dawn doesn't so much rise as it bleeds into the sky, pale gold streaked with the last remnants of smoke from the battlefield. Bragolas stands at the edge of the carnage, the sword's glow finally dimmed to a whisper, its hilt warm against his palm like the last ember of a dying fire. Around him, the survivors move in slow, exhausted motions, gathering the wounded, piling the dead. The air smells of iron and wet earth, of snow half melted by spilled blood. The elders approach, their faces lined with more than age now, with the weight of what they've witnessed. Gorlath's gnarled hand grips his shoulder, the old man's voice barely louder than the wind. "You've done more than defend these lands today," he murmurs. "You've awakened something older than any of us." The title they give him isn't spoken loudly. It doesn't need to be. Guardian of the Pact settles over him like a second cloak, heavier than the first. It's not just a role, it's a reckoning. The sword hums faintly at his side, as if in agreement, and for the first time since he pulled it from that cursed altar, he feels the full truth of what he's bound himself to. Not just a weapon, a covenant, a promise etched in something deeper than stone. Thalion limps up beside him, his axe notched and blackened, his grin tired but real. "Told you we'd make them regret it," he says, clapping Bragolas's back. The familiarity of it, the sheer normalcy, almost makes him laugh. Almost, because beyond the cheering, beyond the crackling pyres sending the fallen to the sky, the horizon stretches empty and waiting. The Yurok's last words coil in his mind like a venomous thing. The war's just waking up. The hall that night is alive with firelight and song, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat and mulled wine. Children dart between the benches, their laughter a sharp, bright counterpoint to the solemn faces of the elders. Bragolas sits at the high table, the sword laid bare before him, its runes catching the light in flickering patterns. The clans toast him, not just as their chieftain, but as the flame they'll follow into the dark. He drinks with them, but his gaze keeps drifting to the windows, where the night presses close. When the last embers fade and the hall falls quiet, he steps outside, the cold biting at his skin. The stars are mercilessly bright, the mountains hulking shadows against the sky. Somewhere out there, the horn of Thore waits. Somewhere, the enemy licks its wounds and plots its next move. But here, for now, the hearth fire burns. Here, the people sleep soundly, their trust a weight as sacred as any blade. Bragolas exhales, his breath fogging in the air. The road ahead is long, and the shadows at its edges are far from spent. But for the first time since this began, he doesn't just see the burden, he sees the path, and he knows deep as the roots of the mountains that he won't walk it alone. The sword's pulse echoes his own heartbeat, steady and sure. Dawn will come again, and with it, the next chapter of the tale.